Let's begin. We are on Yud Aleph Amud Bet 11b3. Let's begin. Ha'arisin v'ha'chakirin v'ha'kablanin. So these are various types of people that are going to be working in your field. Okay, each one is just a slightly different pay package for how they do the work in the field. Hare'elu ya'asu aharim bishvilam. So let's say the person unfortunately has someone who passes away. So it's it's not their field. The person needs them to do the job. Otherwise, there's going to be great loss because things were not picked, things were not taken care of, things were not watered. So the halakha is others are allowed to do work for them during their avelut. And we explained already that when someone else is doing work for you during your avelut, that could also be a distraction from avelut. But sometimes it could be a distraction that someone else is not doing your work. So the Mishnah, the Gemara is telling us from the Braita that others are allowed to do their work for them during their avelut. Ha-hamarin, ha-gemalim, va-sifanim. People who act like hamorim, no. Ha-hamarim, the people who they have fleets of donkeys, the donkey renters, okay? Hagemalin, the people who also rent out camels. V'asapanim, and the people who give out sfinot, boats. So the people who rent these items, hare'elu lo ya'asu. These people are not allowed to do their work on the holiday, during their avelut. Vim hem hayu muchkarim. What if, as an example, muskarin etzel achirim. What if they were already under contract for someone to provide the service, either directly or indirectly? In other words, either this animal was rented, or I'm renting myself as a service provider for, let's say the Pony Express. Went to a guy who rented horses. So this guy has a deal, either for a horse or for his whole fleet, of horses. He's rented out to others, to somebody else. Also, they're able to continue doing what they need to do during the time of mourning. Why? Because it's considered also a loss. Schir yom, but let's say a person is a schir yom, he's rented for the day. Now, the word schir could mean rented, but it could also mean salaried or paid, right? Like sachar. So a person who's a schir yom, he's a day laborer, all right? Afilu be'ir acheret lo ya'aseh. Even if a person is already signed up to work from a completely different city, he's not allowed to do that work because schir yom, we say, that's not enough of a loss. Now, just take a look at Rashi on schir yom. Rashi says, where is it here? Schir yom, you see at the end of the line, midway through. Schir yom, you see it? At the end of the line. Echad, he's rented for one day. Ve'afilu be'ir acheret, even if it's in another city. Ve'en yod'im sham shu aver. What was the Gemara adding by saying he's in another city? It's saying that if you're worried about marit ayin, no one in that city even knows he's sitting avelut. So maybe that would be an extra reason to allow him to do it. Veleka mishum marit ayin lo yaseh. Ho'il, since he's able to renege on the deal, he could say, I'm backing out. Like we say, po'el chozer va'afilu b'chatzi hayom. A po'el, a worker, is able to say, I don't want to work anymore. I don't want to do this job. Va'afilu b'chatzi hayom, even halfway through the day. It's not such a great loss because the whole hire is for half a day or for a day. So for a minimal amount of loss, we never allowed the person to work during morning, right? By the way, it's interesting because this is actually current New York State law as well. If you have a contract with someone who's working for you, you can't force them to run out the contract and work for you. The worker is always allowed to say, I don't want to work anymore. That's not the case in every other state, by the way. Most places, I agreed to work for you for a month at this salary. I have to complete the work. In New York, It's not in every state, but the law is I could just say I don't want to work anymore. That's Jewish law as well. Why? Because just interesting how it overlaps.
Termination.
No, because it overlaps with Kili b'nei Yisrael avadim v'lo avadim la'avadim. You're not allowed to own somebody. What defines if you own them or not? If they could back out of the work. So a schir yom is allowed to not continue working. So since he's allowed to not continue working, and the whole contract is only for 1 day's pay, so we would not say that to not do it is a cause of a significant loss, in which case we'd allow you to do it during morning.
The avalut and the loss, the blending, even during avalut with the chol, and with the moed, chol moed, the loss rule still applies for the avel, right?
Correct. Except it mixes in. Except that we seem to have a scenario that we said that where there's a loss, others are allowed to do the work for him. Here it's mentioning that he's allowed to do the work. Right? So we'll have to figure out when are we allowing the mourner himself to do the work and when are we making someone else do the work. Okay?
So if you're hired for a day, you're not allowed to work, but if you were hired for an extended amount of period, you are allowed to work?
That's what the Gemara is saying over here. If you're already locked in, muhkarim, if you're already signed up, so to speak, for your whole, that's considered a big loss because you're going to miss out on all of this. So in a case like that, you'd be allowed to do that work. Okay? What if, as an example, he already has this contract to work for somebody else, even though it's going on, kibolet is from the word kablan, even though it's going on a situation where it's still, we didn't say for 6 months, we didn't say so it could be that I'm only going to work for a day. Still, lo yaseh, right? He should not do it, even though it seems to be a larger job, right? In other words, the job could take a month. So how do we look at a month's job, which is signed on by a hourly or daily basis? You catch that? Yeah. If I have a job and a contract for a month, and now I'm sitting there as in Hashem, not me, just a misirat modah. Anytime we say me or you with avelu, we don't mean to say. We're just giving an example of the Torah, like the Gemara says, "Ki alecha oragnu kol hayom." Okay, listen to this. Let's say a person's in mourning. He gets a job for a month. If he doesn't do the job, if he's not doing the work, he loses out a very big loss. That's considered to be davar aved. So we talked about this idea that either others or he could do it for himself. Says the Gemara, but a schir yom, what if the guy is working for a day? Then he can't, because it's not a big enough loss, okay? Ask the Gemara now a clever answer, a clever question. What if I have a month's worth of work, but the month's worth of work is bikibolet? So in other words, it's not a fixed amount for the full job, it's a pay-to-play amount. Proportion. So if I work a day, I get paid for a day. Okay, so in other words, I have a job, do a whole kitchen. But how much am I paying you for? Paying you by the day.
Only lose 1 day.
Oh, so the Gemara says, in that case, we would still look at it as a piecemeal job, not even though it's for the month, but because the contract is not for the month's pay, so therefore I could take off today and not lose. Yeah? Which again, by the way, it's pure logic. Right? Because, if I could just not work for these 7 days. Okay. Says the Gemara.
Manuel, the benchmark.
Af al pi. What does it mean? Af al pi shebekibolet. What does that mean? Even though it was done in a partial. V'lo mibaye she'ena bekibolet. It sounds like it's saying, even though it's piecemeal, right? V'lo mibaye she'ena kibolet, which means that if it's not piecemeal, it's even more obvious that you would not be able to work. Right? What's the logic here? Hire you for a month, even though I'm paying you by the day, you're not allowed to do it. Not even though, because. Even though makes it sound like if I hired you for a month and it's not piecemeal, then you can't. Then it's even more simple. You can't do it. But that's not the case. Adraba, the opposite. Kibolet kidide dami. When a person is doing it bikibolet. It's like the person's own work. So there, it's even more likely that it should be asur than here.
What if the piecemeal work, there was a deadline to do something
Yeah.
on that particular day?
It's a
Could
very,
it take off?
it's very good. It's a very good point.
He had to finish
Right.
something.
If
Yes,
he's
he
missing
gets
that-
paid by the day.
Right.
But the
It's a
the
different-
person who hired him said, "You got to complete this by this day."
So in general, you can't, like we said earlier, the deadline can't force me to work. The deadline could just say that if you don't have a deadline by this time, then you lose the money. Right? So then basically we're back to where we were to start with, which is if the loss is enough of a loss, right? Because we have that ingredient, so it renders it, it's always rendered the same. Okay?
You lose the whole contract of the 30 days because of that one day.
You got to do it. You got to work.
That's a big loss.
Sorry?
You lose the whole contract because of that one day.
So if I lose the whole contract, then that's
Damage.
similar.
Damage.
Let's say, as an example, you built in a scenario that if I don't take the job now, even though I pay you by the day, you lose the whole job if you don't take it now. Then de facto, it's not bikibolet. In other words, in terms of the pay structure, it might be kibolet, but in terms of the loss structure, it's the same as a full contract.
What's kibolet again?
Kibolet is when you're getting paid by the day. So in other words, you worked a day, you got paid for a day. Even though the job is a month-long job.
So the loss is greater in that situation. You'd be able to do it?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that all we're doing here is coming up with different mechanisms to make the loss equal to a month's loss. Doesn't matter how you got it to a month's loss, you still have the significant davar aved. And that creates a scenario where either he would be allowed or acherim would be allowed to do it for him. So the Gemara says, Adraba, when you have a scenario where it's kibolet, so then it's kidideh. That's like it's your own work, and in that case, it's more likely to be prohibited. Which means that the Gemara should not have said af bekibolet. It's more likely bekibolet that would make it asur.
Does it differentiate?
So we wouldn't know in a case where it's not bekibolet.
It doesn't differentiate somebody else doing the work, it's a goy or a Jew, does it?
Sorry? No, we've not talked about goy yet.
Okay, so just saying somebody is hired to do the work.
Yes.
We didn't differentiate.
No, we didn't differentiate between non-Jew and Jew yet. Okay, as we said, the whole question of Amira La'akum, like I said to Jonah, is something that we're going to come across. Okay. Yeah. Ela Ema, says the Gemara. No, so that's not what we want you to say over here, right? It can't be that we're saying af bikibolet. That if you got melechet acherim, if someone had the work of somebody else that they contracted you to do, but they did it. It says af al pi bikibolet. You can't do it. Rather, what should it say? Ben kibolet, ben she'ena kibolet. Whether it's paid by the day, or whether it's not paid by the day, piecework or not, lo ya'aseh. You can't do it. Why? In one scenario, the reason will be, and this is beautiful. Look at Rashi on this.
Oh, yes.
ואף על פי שבקיבולת, אחרים היא שקיבל עליו לצמיתות, אותו בגד להורגו בכך וכך. The guy took on a full job, right? And the job is on the whole size. קיבולת לעשות בכך וכך, he made a deal with him that I'm going to do the job for so much and so much. כדידי דמי, the Gemara says, that work of others is, if you're doing it piecemeal, it's just like your own work, which we said is asur. Ve'asur aval she'ena bekibolet delo havikidei share, when it's not like yours. So the Gemara is saying that in some cases, whether it's bekibolet, it's asur, or if it's not bekibolet, it's asur. Each side, though, has a reason why it will be asur, and not that one is more likely asur than the other, like the Gemara's question actually was. Okay? The Gemara Braita continues, let's say it's not that someone had work and they contracted him to do it. What if the opposite? He had work and he contracted other people to do it. Okay? So could other people do work for him? Bibeto lo yasu. They can't do work for him in his house. Bibait acher yasu. In the house of another person, they're able to do it. Who could think about why this is the case? We already came across this idea before.
So if he hires a contractor to do work in his house,
Yeah.
You can.
he can't help the contractor.
The guy can't do the work.
He's disrupting the.
Bibeto lo yase. Bibaito shel acher. Another somewhere else.
Yes.
Yasu. Look at Rashi. We already came across this. Marit Ayin. Says Rashi, 5 lines from the bottom. Bibeto shel avel. In the house of the avel lo yasu oto. They shouldn't do it. Mishum chashad, because people will suspect yomeru hu be'atzmo misayeb melacha. People will think, oh, there's work going on in his house. The guy's probably getting involved too. The guy's a contractor.
Oh, so you can't let the third party do the work.
Third party can't do the work in his house. Inami shelo yomeru. Other reason is shelo yomeru. People shouldn't say b'me evlo hiskiru lezeh hapoel. And during his work, hiskiro lezeh hapoel. This guy, the poel, is hired him.
But didn't
So
you say in private? Remember we got to that. You can't do the work outside, but you can do it in private. Nobody's seeing you.
So that's where we came across the halakha.
Yes,
But that case was a case of burial. Remember? That they're able to saw the boards in his chatzer, right? Or not in his chatzer, in his house, not in his house, right? So that was for a specific need. Here the Gemara is saying that when a person has melacha, his melacha in the hands of another, right, in his house, he could do it. In the house of someone else, he's able to do. Gemara continues.
Maria.
Merion bere de Ravin. Merion. We always got to make a list of all these names, by the way, because the only Merion I know was the love interest of Robin Hood. Okay, Maid Marian. All right, so yeah, but that's Mariano. Right, this is Merion. Unbelievable, but these names, they don't turn up. And it's so interesting that we chose certain names to be part of the Jewish naming system, right? But we got to add this to the Parnoch column. No, they did.
What's this Marion guy?
Merion, but I'm just saying that we could have used the names of these great Chachamim. Merion Bere de Ravin. Merion was the son of Ravin, one of the great contributors to Gemara. Umar Bere de Rav Acha, and Mar the son of Rav Acha. Bere de Rava, the son of Rava. Have lehu hau gamma. Okay, they had gamla de Torah v'hade adadi. So they owned together gamla de Torah, which means that not the ox itself, okay, not the Torah itself, with an aleph, not with a hey, not the shore itself, but rather they own the yoke of the ox. Itra bemilta, bemar berederavacha, berederava. Unfortunately, what happened? Something happened. Okay, that's why we're using a euphemism for it, because they don't like to use this kind of negative language. Okay, so we gave an example. Itra bemilta. Something happened. Okay, so he had a case of avelut. Upaskele gamle. And he took off the yoke from on top of the animal in order that the animal should not do the work. Okay, so in other words, this was work that would have, so to speak, got done by itself. It would seem. Gemara says, "Amar Ravashi, Gavra Rava, Kimar Breder Rav Acha Avirachi." Such a great person did like this. I understand that he was not worried about his own loss, because he felt he wanted to be strict with regard to the laws of mourning. Since he was in a partnership with other people, why was he not worried about causing them loss? Didn't we learn in the Braita? If either they, as we said, or the Gemalim and the Sapanin and the Hamarim, if either they or their animals were rented out to somebody else for during that time, right? Then they're allowed to give their animals to the person that rented it. Why? Because the other person is now going to suffer the loss if you withhold the animal. The Gemara says, "V'hu savar He held, Mar, the son of Rav Acha, held, Adam Chashuv Shani, since he's a very well-respected person, right? He had to be stricter with himself. So even if other people were involved, he had an obligation to withhold his animal from working. Now, there's a couple ways to understand what this Hava Amina is. Hu Savar Adam Chashuv Shani. Look at Rashi say. What Rashi says, Adam Chashuv Shani, Deha Veha Asur Lidide Leme'evad. For this and this, it was Asur for him to do. What is that?
This and this.
What does that mean? Deha Veha. Deha Veha. This and this, Asur Lidide Leme'evad. What does that mean? What is Rashi telling us? What's he saying? What do you mean? It's not the Hayav. The other guy, the other guy is now going to suffer a loss because of it, and he's not in mourning. No obligation. So what's Rashi communicating? How do you understand this? I believe that there's a couple ways to understand this, and I think that there will be massive ramifications in halakha in how we explain what Mar Breda of Acha is actually saying. And by the way, you see that Rambam and Shulchan Aruch are bringing down this teaching of Adam Chashuv Shani.
So the highest standard
For a more respectable person who's in mourning, he has to be more strict with regards to these laws, right? So what is Rashi communicating? How is he explaining this? Adam Hashuv. What would you guess if you had to guess what that means?
Guess what means?
What does it mean that since he's more important, right? He's strict. What do you mean? How do you have the other guy, the other partners in this business
He's
venture?
gonna pay him back.
Sorry?
He's more important. He's more religious. He's more whatever to the community.
Okay.
So by definition, he's probably going to pay Marion back for the loss that he suffered.
So in other words, what he's
going to take the hit to
He's
show
gonna-
everyone that I have to do the right thing,
yeah,
the
and
purported right thing,
then I'll have to pay him
I
back.
have to pay him back.
So in other words, Adam Chashuv Shani would mean that even though I have the heter to let it plow in his field, but I'm not going to take that heter because of the way it looks, and I have to be the highest level. So therefore, this is what I'm going to do. But he still have to pay him back.
Alternatively,
Yeah.
he could say, "Listen, Marion went partners with Mar.
Yeah.
I know Mar is a Hashuv guy. I have to anticipate if something, God forbid, happens to Mar,
Comes with the
I'm going to
territory.
take the hit also.
So the other partner.
This and this.
So can I just point out this and this? Now let's look at this and this. Maybe Adam Chashuv Shani is not talking about him. Maybe Adam Hashuv Shani is the other guy.
But the other guy's not in mourning.
He's not in mourning. But since I'm a Hashuv person, and and I'm seeing that this is going to be a problem for him, my behavior, even though I'm allowed, my behavior is to shut down my business in partnership with my guy because I'm Adam Hashuv.
I don't agree.
I'm just giving you two alternatives.
This guy's not in mourning.
No, he's not in mourning. True.
You can act like you're in mourning.
No, I'm not acting like I'm in mourning.
If you shut it down, you will.
No, I'm not. You know why? Because what I'm doing is I'm respecting the other guy's mourning. And I'm respecting the other guy's suspicion. One more time. People might be suspicious of this guy. The halakha is, even though people might be suspicious of you, you're still allowed to do it because there's a partner here. Now, if the other partner is a regular eye gay, no problem. He doesn't have the higher level of marit ayin. But the second way of learning this is, since you're Adam Hashuv, Mr. Second Partner, you have to be stricter with every law in the book. Also with laws which associate if you're going to let the other guy have suspicion fall on him. So 1 minute. I have to be stricter with Shabbat. I have to be stricter with kosher. I also have to be stricter with your marit ayin. You get that? Totally. Yeah. Two ways of learning Adam Hashuv Shani. Now look at Rashi again now. Deha veha asur. That for both of them, it was asur for them to do.
He assumes his responsibility.
You could read Rashi in very different ways because he really leaves it open. This one and this one, it was asur for him to do. Doesn't quite clearly express it, but you could read both of those interpretations. What's the difference, by the way, in those two opinions? Does he have to pay him back or not? If my obligation, let me give you a simple one. Okay, let's say I'm a rabbi. I live in Israel. You're a rabbi. You live in New York. We have a company, online, whatever. Okay, we're selling goods nonstop. Now it's Shabbat in New York. Someone not Shomer Shabbat goes on the website, sees the rabbi from New York has his website, his business open on Shabbat. What's the answer? It's not on Shabbat. The other rabbi has the job, not Shabbat. So two ways of looking at it. One way is, right now it's my problem, Marit Ayin, not his. The other way is that rabbi has to be worried about the Chilul Hashem that comes from me too. I see a rabbi doing something. He does not even aware that he's doing something. It's making a massive Chilul Hashem. Do I have an obligation to go tell him, listen, because now I had the opportunity to be able to stop that Chilul Hashem. Who's it on now? On me. So the second opinion is saying, you don't have to pay the other guy back. He has his own responsibility to withhold the business from operating. Got it?
I view it that way.
So we got both ways on the table, and both ways are valid, and then you have to figure out what the ramifications would be, la halakha. But you see how sometimes you can have two different pshatim in the Gemara, and the difference will be financial. Let's continue the Gemara.
Shouldn't you also think that the Adam Chashuv should just stick by the law and be the example? Like not go above and beyond, and then it would actually be the second interpretation of Rashi?
What do you mean?
If the Adam Chashuv, if I see an Adam Chashuv doing X, but the Talmud or the law is canonized as Y, then I'm going to think it's Y.
Okay.
Right? So therefore, if he's really Chashuv, he should stick with Y, and then you bring in Rashi's second explanation, or the other way to look at it.
Emmanuel is asking a genius question. Maybe now people will start learning that in a partnership you're not allowed to do it. Because look, Mar Baravashi did that. Mar Baravacha. You know what Emmanuel is saying? It's true that people are all looking to the rabbi, but now they're going to learn the wrong halacha. We don't have Marit Ayin on too good. You only have Marit Ayin on not good enough.
I don't view it as too good.
No, in other words, if they're going the extra level because they want to stop Chilul Hashem, so we don't say that a person, we have to be worried that people will learn the wrong halacha. No. What we would say, by the way, and this is something that I do all the time. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say a person is, for whatever reason, has to stand. Let's say for whatever reason, medical, got a problem with the lock knee. He's got to stand. Imagine as a rabbi, I start standing for the whole of tefillah. People start looking at me. They're like, "Oh,
He's standing.
I'm supposed to stand, really?" Because look, the rabbi is standing. So a lot of times, what I'll do is I'll mention
An exception.
that, guys. I remember one time I had the Rosh Yeshiva of Mikdash Melech. Was the head of Camp Shiftei Israel. It was Rosh Chodesh Av. He walked in. He was wearing slippers on Rosh Chodesh Av. Like the non-leather.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I walked up to him. I was like, Rabbi, unbelievable. I never heard that, because from the 9 days you're already doing we're not eating meat, different things that we're not doing from the 9 days, right? And then from Shavuot Shechalbo, and then there's I said I never heard of anyone already not wearing leather shoes on Rosh Chodesh Av. So he smiled at me. He says, "Why do you think I'm wearing them on Rosh Chodesh Av?" I said, "Look, the rabbi is a big rabbi. Maybe he feels the Churban Bayit more than me. I only feel it on Tisha B'Av, and you already from Rosh Chodesh Av, you're already feeling it, so you're already with." He goes, "Nah, my feet are hurting." But he let me get down the whole. He let me give the whole pshat, the Dvar Torah, and he's like, "No, ingrown toenail." Right. So yes, sometimes a rabbi needs to explain it.
Be careful with that. You look
do.
at it as a leader.
You do have to be. You do have to be careful.
100%.
You do have to be careful.
Yes.
But
I watch that all the time.
you do have to be careful. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that I shouldn't do something which is more correct. I just have to make sure that people understand why. Okay, not why the letter. The people have to understand
Correlation.
why I'm doing it, right? And I think maybe that's what the Gemara is doing. You got that? The Gemara is saying, don't learn from that. We're bringing it up so that you can find out that the Adam Hashuv actually has a different halakha. By the way, there's quite a few things that are like this.
No other explanation?
That Adam Hashuv has a different halakha.
There's no other explanations by any other for the sources on that Rashi's words.
I'm sure there's always limitless.
There's nothing that.
No, that's the opinions. Those are the two routes that I studied.
So open that, you would think.
Well, not really, because there's only two Adam Hashuvs. There's only two people involved. It could either be Adam Hashuv is talking about him, or Adam Hashuv is talking about him. Right? Either the guy himself, Mar Barabacha, he said, I'm Adam Hashuv, so therefore I have to behave in a way which is above reproach, okay? Which is a beautiful thing. And the Chachamim always try to do that. Or, since my partner is Adam Hashuv, so I know that he also would not allow me to plow the field, or not, because it's his responsibility also to worry about the Chilul Hashem. Okay, let's continue. The Gemara continues. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, Mikable kibolet. Let's say a person has a job where they got a job to be able to do, but it's a piecemeal job, like we said. Betoch tchum asur. Let's say it's within the tchum, the boundary of the city. Asur. The person's not allowed to do it. And now, what are we talking about over here? Here's where we're first talking about with non-Jews. Okay, so the guy comes. Chutz latchum mutar, but outside the tchum, a person's allowed to do it. Now, what are we talking about over here? The person is talking about mikable kibolet. We're getting a contract to complete something. Now, I'm not doing the work, but it's happening with Tochat Chum. So I have non-Jewish workers, and the non-Jewish workers are going to be working, but they're going to be working within the Tchum. So people are going to see them. That's really the point, right? Then it's Asur. Chutz Latchum, if they're out in the middle of nowhere, right, then I'm allowed to. I have a contract with them to do it. Why? Because they're allowed to work whenever they want, and no one's going to see it. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, 1 second. Va'afilu chutz latchum. What, even outside the tchum? Lo amaran, that we said outside the tchum is allowed to be in contract with non-Jewish workers, even if they might work on the Shabbat, even if they might work on Shabbat. Lo amaran, we never said el deleka mata dimikar v'lahatam, that there's no other city next to that tchum. So it's not about it being outside of my city. It's it being outside of the tchum of any city. So nothing is even close to it where there might be a problem that people will see it and see that a Jewish project has non-Jewish workers working on Shabbat. But if there is a Jewish city that's close to that place, even if it's not my Jewish city, still the halakha would be that it is asur, and they'll think that a Jewish person is allowed to hire non-Jewish workers to work for them on Shabbat. Amar Rav Mishashi says, even when there's no other Jewish city next to it, so it's not in my Jewish city. There's no other Jewish city. We only said this was with regards to Shabbatot and Yamim Tovim. Because people are not going to be there because it's Shabbat and Chol Moed. אבל בחולו של מועד, דשכיחי אנשי דאזלי ואתו לאתם, אסור. חול המועד, where people are allowed to travel, so there it's even there it's asur. What winds up is something which is mind-blowing. It turns out that there are cases where Chol HaMoed has stricter laws than Shabbat and Yom Tov. Where there's a contract with someone who's not Jewish in an area outside of the city. Effectively, what we're expecting on Chol HaMoed is people are going on all these trips. They might be driving wherever they're driving.
See more stuff.
And then they see more stuff. Maybe they're going to come across it, and they're not going to understand how you did it and in what way it was done correctly. All right? So
you can't do it on Shabbat, and you still can't do it on Chol HaMoed.
sorry?
Can't do it on Shabbat, of course.
Can't do it. You can't do it with
Hire
what?
a goy on Shabbat
Yes.
under any circumstance.
No, there are circumstances where a person would be allowed to hire a goy on Shabbat,
If he's out of the
not for his own. It's not for his own benefit, and it's not when he's commanded them to do it specifically on Shabbat. There's a lot of conditions within this. Okay, but what we're learning over here, the part that's relevant to us. So in other words, there's many conditions, but there are cases where a person, if they're in a contract with a contractor, where they don't have to stop the person from working on Shabbat. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I have a property in Dinyersville. No one will ever see it. No one will ever know. I call up Giovanni and Sons, and I tell him, Tony, I need you to fix the building. The guy says, okay, no problem. Deliver it in a year. Do I have to go and make sure he's not working on Shabbat? No, no problem. You know why? It's not my business. It's not my business.
and
What-
it's detached from where you are.
I said it's in Jiddy,
it's-
nowhere.
there's no connection.
What happens if it's in my city? Yes, then it's my problem. Because Giovanni's doing the work. Nobody knows that I didn't tell him to work on Shabbat. Maybe I told him, I want you working 24/7. I need it up for the summer. So as far as they're concerned, maybe I instructed him. By the way, I had this many times. In Deal, you have insane laws, not the whole area, not just Deal, Allenhurst, all over, where by a certain date they'll make a difference what you're up to. You could have 3 days of work left. They're shutting you down. Okay, done. Since that's the case, you have people that are rushing. They can't give up Shabbat. So people have been building, and the rabbis had to come in and tell them, you're not allowed to do this. Everybody knows that there's a deadline looming, and even though you're kind of saying, "Oh, I didn't tell him," but you gave him a job that's only possible to be finished if they're working 7 days a week and not 6.
But that would violate anyway in the town with the Jew scene. Once you have a goy.
Correct.
That would violate anyway.
That would violate anyway.
Because it's too obvious.
Yes, I'm saying, and then they told him they weren't allowed to do it. Yeah.
So I hire a contractor to do a job. He can't work on Shabbat?
You can if it's fall. Nobody sees.
Depends.
India.
In deal. No.
In the wintertime.
No.
Too many people see.
No.
Even though he's in Brooklyn,
Huh?
even though like the owner of that
No, but
house-
there's Jews there.
There's Jews there. They see. They
It's
think
literally in the
You, they
city.
think you hired them for
you can't
Shabbat.
have
Yeah.
a job.
I gotta get doing
own a
work now.
business that's open on
Huh?
Shabbat.
I have a guy doing work now.
So you got to tell him.
I don't tell him to work on this day or that day.
No.
That's what it's saying.
You kind of say, it's not my business. That's the attitude.
No, I need to know the halakha.
That's what's saying. We're not going to the halakha now. I will go into a fuller.
Okay, just tell me in 2 months what the halakha is.
After the job is done.
Okay.
The problem is if I tell you in 2 months, then the Shabbat is the makor of all beracha. So you kind of want to know that 2 months
Tell me
ago.
now.
Yeah.
Rabbi, I apologize for my lack of understanding of something so basic. So you're saying you're not allowed to own a business that operates on Shabbat even though you're not working there?
That's too loaded a question. We'll have to go into each case individually. There are times where people own a business, they have a partner, the partner is not Jewish, the partner operates. When it's done correctly, the partner owns completely Saturday for losses and benefits. And there are things that we do and we have done that will allow the person to literally not have a business on Shabbat. They sold that business. You have to be very careful how it's structured. You have times when people they're kind of writing the T's and the I's and they're not crossing the T's and dotting the I's. And just that little bit changes it from being a business that's open on Shabbat to a business that's not open on Shabbat.
Thank you.
All right? So in every case, I always have an expert involved and he writes it out properly and he structures it the right way. Okay? So the Gemara, the point of that Gemara is really where we were trying to get to, where the Gemara says that Chol HaMoed is stricter. Why? Because the net is wider. Okay? Fine. Gemara continues, and let's hopefully we'll get through his last piece. Gemara says, and then we'll end. Oh wow, it's very late.
How come that doesn't apply? That, like you said, there's situations where Shabbat you can. Right?
It's apply, but he
No,
said
no,
it
no.
is a
No, I said
condition.
there's little specific rules.
Yeah.
How come though, for the average person seeing it, we don't go to that average rule of for the average guy? It's marita, it's asur for Shabbat. So even though you have a special deal with him and this and that,
Yeah.
everybody won't say that. Everybody will think that you're having somebody work on Shabbat.
So the idea that Adam Chashuv Shani doesn't mean that there's always a two-tier system of very hashuv guy. No, other one not. We're just gonna. It's gonna be too long to
we see what
take
I'm
it to the
saying.
next one. Baruch Hanei Le'olam, amen, amen.